Hello there, and welcome now to YouTube lecture number 19, our second lecture in period 7. We're going to look briefly at an emerging world power. We're only going to look at the beginning part of what's taken place with American imperialism. So we're going to do this by looking directly at the key concepts. So let's go to 7.3, Roman numeral 1, letter A. And here it tells us, many Americans began to advocate overseas expansionism. You think back to what we were talking about up until the Civil War, manifest destiny. Right? Americans believed in the idea of going from the Atlantic Ocean all the way across to the Pacific. This was also part of what was known as American exceptionalism. And now the Civil War is over. We've gone through the Gilded Age. And Americans are starting to believe that maybe that manifest destiny should take them overseas as well in the late 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century. This is going to lead to new territorial ambitions, as it tells us there in the concept, acquisitions in the Western Hemisphere and in the Pacific Ocean. Well, let's look at something very specific here in letter A. All right, so here's the question. The perception in the 1890s is that the Western frontier was closed. All right, so economic motives, competition with other European imperialist ventures of the time period, and third, racial theories, all furthered arguments that Americans were destined to expand their culture and their norms. Manifest destiny. So again, here's your multiple choice question for you. Right? What furthered arguments that Americans were destined to expand their culture and norms to others, especially the non-white nations of the globe? Well, here are your three reasons. Economic motives, competition with Europeans, racial theories. Europe has been expanding its imperialistic powers throughout the 19th century, mostly in Africa and in Southeast Asia. There's very little for America now to go to expand its empire. But they're going to want to. In the late 19th century, Captain Alfred Thayer Mahan. Now, he's an American captain. He writes a book. It's published in 1890, The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, from 1660 to 1783. It's a history book of sea power, but it points to the great British Empire and what made the British Empire so influential throughout the world and so powerful was its navy. This is an extremely important book that's published because it's going to influence a lot of individuals, including Theodore Roosevelt, bully, to want to create a very modern and a very powerful United States Navy. Up until now, America's only had a very small, very modest navy. But now they're going to want to go out of their way to build a larger, modern, steel battleships and destroyers and have this real, honest-to-goodness Navy that they can use to protect themselves and secure overseas territories. Now this goes against, now you might wonder, why is George Washington's fat face up here? Well, because what did he preach? George Washington, since his time period, what was American foreign policy based on? Does anybody remember? Can anybody think? I don't know. I don't know. I think there's a few of you are probably yelling it or thinking it. Then again, maybe nobody's thinking what it actually is. If you thought isolationism, you'd be correct. All right, so there you are. Those of you who thought isolationism, American foreign policy, do not get, and what did he say? No entangling alliances with foreign powers. America has been that up until right at the turn of the century. It's going to start to change now. Let's stay in key concept 7.3, Roman numeral 1. Actually, that should not say AB. That should just say B. That's my mistake there. I apologize. But here again is the same key concept, Roman numeral 1 we talked about. But now here's B. America goes to war with Spain. Spain is a dying empire, right? But it's that war with Spain that leads to this massive acquisition of island territories. Cuba becomes what's called a protectorate. Cuba is allowed to stay its own government, but they create a constitution in Cuba, and they add what's known as the Platt Amendment, where America gets to basically control the internal affairs of Cuba. Make sure you know that. The Platt Amendment was added to the Cuban Constitution, where it gave America the right to basically decide the destiny of Cuba. Now, before they went to war with Spain, Americans passed the Teller Amendment. Now, it's not an amendment to the Constitution. It's just this little amendment to the War Act that caused the war with Spain. In the Teller Amendment, it stated that Americans will not acquire territories and make them, or Cuba, I'm sorry, will not acquire Cuba and make it part of Cuba. So the Teller Amendment and the Platt Amendment go hand in hand in that regard. But again, as they're expanding now overseas, they're expanding their economy, they're expanding their military presence in the Caribbean and Latin America. They get into this very long war in the Philippines afterwards, the American-Filipino War, an undeclared war and a very brutal war. A lot of guerrilla warfare fought there and atrocities on both sides. Some extremely horrible things take place in the Philippines. And America becomes much more involved in Asia. Here I have the open door policy. This is a policy that America writes. Secretary of State John Hay writes this. It's an open letter to the world that calls for free trade in China. China has been carved up by several European powers by this time period, and there are what's called spheres of influence. That Britain controls one section of China, France another, Germany has one, Belgium has one. So America is asking the whole world, though, to open up China to free trade, is what the open door policy is. America is going to become more and more involved in Asian affairs now. So these are key concepts that are leading America towards becoming a world power. This is Teddy Roosevelt. This is his army that he created. Remember I told you in class he creates his own army, the Rough Riders, and he winds up taking San Juan Hill, and all of his men begin to cheer. We did it! We did it! We did it! Yay! We did it! We did it! We did it! Yay! I had to hear that twice. That. Could you imagine him standing up there yelling that like that? That would be awesome. But I don't think they actually said that. But it does make Theodore Roosevelt a national hero. He is a war hero, winning basically the Spanish-American War. And as we saw in class, he winds up becoming President of the United States. Well, for further reading, please turn to our book, The America's History, pages 654 to 659. It talks about from expansion to imperialism. This is a political cartoon that deals with the open door policy in China. All right, until we meet again, goodbye. Have a great evening.